Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Horse Geeks podcast, where we look at horses and riding from the inside out. I'm Kirsten Nelsen, professional horse trainer, and with me is my co-host, Deb Romero, certified Alexander Technique instructor. And you know what? Our topic today is what Deb always says. What
What
the
Deb
heck?
always
What
says.
Deb always says. What the heck does it mean to
What?
have your joints open and available? Because that is a Debism that you
That's
say
a
that a lot.
Debism?
That's a
Oh, I love
Debism.
it.
But you know what I thought of before I forget? This thought occurred to me while I was driving around this morning that I went, maybe instead of saying I'm a horse trainer, I should call myself a horse educator. I
Oh,
go,
I like that.
that's really more along the lines of how I look at
Okay, we'll flip that switch.
horse training. Yeah, I don't know if the world's ready, but I
Well, that
really
doesn't
liked
matter.
I really liked that term horse educator
Okay.
and people too
That's
is
broad.
sort of a
Yeah,
side
that
note.
we're just not used to hearing that.
Yeah.
What does that mean? You're going to get a lot more questions, I
But I
think.
was just having this conversation with a lady. I'm guiding her through putting her own horse through the colt starting process, right? Which to me is, kindergarten to eighth grade level of
Right.
education for the horse. But a lot of horses that we buy, it's like that part of their education has been skipped.
It's
It's,
non-existent from the ones I've gotten.
yeah.
Non-existent. Ground manners.
So we're trying to put horses in high school and university level without
Exactly.
them sort of
That's a good way
having
to put it.
good fundamentals. And I thought, well, maybe I'm a horse educator, not a horse trainer.
I like that. And
Hmm.
that explanation is great.
Yeah. Sidebar. Sorry, everybody.
Sidebar.
Yeah.
That's
Back to the
us.
topic. So, and we actually got a comment on the
Ah,
YouTube channel.
yay.
What does it mean to have your joints open and available? So I thought it would be a great podcast
Sure.
episode for you to go
What?
give us more detail.
Yeah, so I think, and it's probably been quite a long time ago in our podcasting, we talked about different types of muscle contractions.
Mm.
So,
The
most people,
eccentric, concentric.
right. So, most people understand that when you shorten a muscle, that's a contraction. The other one people kind of might be vague on is the eccentric load contraction, which is the
Yeah.
muscle is in length.
Yeah, so I do this all the time when I teach. I'll be like, okay, shorten your arm muscle, and people
Hmm.
instantly,
They get
or
that.
I say contract your arm muscle,
Hmm.
and they shorten it to show off the biceps, right?
Right.
And I go, now, can you fully lengthen your arm and also contract the
Contract that
muscle?
muscle.
And
Two
that,
two different things.
yeah, I can see the wheels turning
Yeah, like
sometimes.
what?
Like,
What does that mean?
yeah,
But in both instances, what is happening at the cellular level, the Golgi tendon response, is it sends a message to the brain that that muscle is already in use. So therefore, no information can pass through it.
go a little further on that. Take me
Go a
down
little
the
further
rabbit.
on that.
Yeah, take me
Go
down the
down
rabbit
the
hole.
rabbit hole. So, and there's also something called the Golgi tendon, which it's kind of that thing when you put your body in a stretch of some sort and you stretch for maybe 20 to 30 seconds and then all of a sudden it becomes painful or you can't stretch any further.
Hmm.
There's actual receptors in the muscles that send information to the brain saying
Too
that's
far.
enough.
Too far.
Too
That's enough.
far, that's enough. And and if you push it too far, there is your tendon tear or a ligament tear off of a bone
Or a joint issue. Yeah.
or a joint issue. So,
Hmm.
what I mean by open and available is there is a minimal amount of tone, but there's no jamming of the joints. There's no like contracting your thigh muscle it actually goes over the top of your knee and attaches right below your knee. If you're contracting that muscle to hold on, then
Hmm.
you have pretty much locked down your knee because you've jammed the patella right into the knee. So
Interesting. So back up a step, and I just want to clarify, is the Golgi tendon a physical tendon or is it
it's
is it a function?
it's
Like
a
is it a
function. It's
okay,
a
it's a
function. It's
function.
a golden. It's called Golgi tendon. The old anatomy books called it the Golgi tendon reflex, but they're really questioning these days that word reflex.
Uh,
Just anatomically terms, anatomists are
but that's kind of how it works as a
right.
function.
It's a medium that the body when that tendon, the little receptors in it or muscle
Hmm.
get pulled to almost the end, there's a reflex at the chemical cell level that sends the message to the brain, hey,
Stop that.
stop that, and it'll actually pull the muscle or tendon tighter to shut it down.
Oh, so if we try to push through pain,
Yeah.
because you're going to get pain when you like not only is it that chemical response going to the brain, but you also start to feel pain because the muscle is sort of stretching to capacity or
Yeah, you're going to
contracting.
feel it might not be necessarily pain, but it's kind of like the end. You can feel that's the end. I can't go any further. And oh, I have for instance, when my husband was in karate, they were doing pair stretching, and he was sitting down with his legs out, and somebody came up behind him and pushed his back
Oh, to the floor.
to the floor
Ooh,
and tore his hamstring. So, there we in our bodies, if we're paying attention, we know when we're getting to the end of that.
right. And if
Uh,
we mentally, because it is possible, like you said, somebody can physically push us too far
mhm.
by applying force, but we can mentally push ourselves too far with
Oh
the
yeah,
whole no pain, no gain
yeah,
crap. That's like, no pain means you're not damaging yourself. That's what that means.
right. So if you can do a lot of different experiments with yourself. That's the first thing I say when I get on. Are all my joints open and available? And if you can't tune into that, just go to your jaw.
So back it up again. So now I understand the Golgi
Tendon
tendon
reflex, yeah.
reflex. And so basically, if we're hitting that point where we feel our body, like our body, do the muscles tighten more? Is that part of what we feel is sort of
They
a
can
that's far
shorten more,
enough?
yeah, or the ligament tendon attachment by the bone.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, so when the muscles and tendons and ligaments start to shorten because the brain is, or the chemicals are saying that's far enough, then that's what compresses the joint.
Yeah, it's going to shut down the
Okay.
joint.
Okay. Now I'm following you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So being able to get on and just, well, the real thing is putting your feet in the stirrups, because that to me, that's another whole podcast about what is your relationship when you put your foot in the stirrup. Are you locking your ankle? Are you locking your knee? Are you gripping
Heels
to
down
st
does both, by the
Yeah.
way. It locks the ankle and the knee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So questioning all that, what does that, you know, what availability do I have if I've already shut down the proprioceptors to that muscle in my leg?
So, in other words, if the muscle is already tightening and the tendons and ligaments and muscle are already kind of compressing the bones of the joint closer
Hmm.
together, like you said, the patella sort of gets sucked into the knee joint,
Smashed into the knee joint. Yeah.
right? So, it's going to basically we could think of it as closing the joint because it's not really flexion, although the definition of flexion is the bones coming closer together. So I guess it's a
Right.
type of flexion, but
Yes and no, because in an
it's really
eccentric
kind of
load,
a
it's not.
it's more of a compression of the
Hmm.
joint.
It's a holding, maybe another word people might understand. It's that tightening or holding.
So joints, which should have for mobility, they're meant to have a specific full range of motion,
Right.
right?
And
To
is that
act
available to you when you're writing? It's or doing anything, sitting at your desk.
right. So is the range of motion, does it feel restricted or does it feel available?
Like we were talking on the last podcast about using bands or things like that, is that, like the shoulder thing to hold your shoulders back.
That can have
I'm
the same effect.
right. So, just checking in and like I said, sometimes at the very beginning, it's very hard to comprehend what that means because if you're at a level of tension all the time, you don't know what you don't know. So just checking in with your jaw, seeing, am I clenching my jaw? That's a place to.
So just moving the joint on
Mm-hmm.
purpose,
Yeah,
because there's a boatload of joints in the
yeah.
body. So,
And think of the main ones that your elbows, your wrists. I mean, we hardly ever talk about wrist movement anymore. Most of the injuries I see are shoulders, hips, and
mm,
knees, because we're overusing.
so those are, well, the hips and shoulders are ball and socket design. So
Correct.
you have sort of a 360-degree range of
Technically,
motion, technically.
technically.
Um, but it's like the shoulder is kind of a shallow socket
Hmm.
with a bigger ball. And so that's what makes our arms be able to
Hmm.
move wildly, right?
And if you what was the only thing that's really holding the shoulder, the humerus bone in the socket is tendons, ligaments, and muscles.
The rotator cuff,
Yeah,
the
so
famous
the
rotator
famous,
cuff.
which are actually five separate muscles. So it would always make me chuckle when a client would come with a prescription from a doctor saying treat the rotator cuff, and I'm like,
Which part?
which one? Which one's broken? But if you're, pulling in with your shoulders, that is not just affecting your shoulders, as we've talked about before, you're affecting the entire system. So you're pretty much shutting down information to your horse or the ability to listen to what's coming in through your reins.
M like feel muscularly or receive that tactile
Receive.
sensation, you
Yeah.
mean? So not
Otherwise, you're way
so
behind.
so you're saying if the joints feel compressed or restricted or uncomfortable to sort of move freely, then then we know, even if we can't sense it, we know our muscles are
Mhm.
holding excess tension, excess
Right.
contraction. Whether it's long or short contraction
Right.
doesn't
Exactly.
matter. It's just
No.
excess muscle use. And
Hmm.
that's what's causing sort of the limited range of motion through the joint
Right.
or the discomfort or the compression around the joint.
Yeah, and the law of biomechanics, you've seen it, the example of somebody running, and if the quad, which is the muscle on the front of the thigh, doesn't release, when the hamstring, which is at the back of the leg, has to contract, that's when you tear. The law of biomechanics is the opposing muscle group has to let go
Ah.
for the other one on the other side to engage.
Oh, I'm loving this rabbit hole. I'm starting to see why now I'm starting to see why you use that phrase all the time. Because
Hmm.
basically, if the joints have an easy range of motion,
Hmm.
then the muscles have the right amount of tone. Not too much, not too little.
Exactly. And there's an information pathway going to and from.
Right.
So there's no shutdown or having to unlock to receive information. So your
Right.
timing and feel is going to be closer stride by stride than, oh crap, that happened 4 strides ago, and I'm just getting the information.
Well, and this actually came up the other day in a lesson. I hear from writers a lot. I can't feel the bones under the muscles like us.
Mhm.
Because with our rein contact, we can soften our muscles enough to be receptive, like what you're talking
Mhm.
about. So if we're feeling velvet, we don't pat it really hard in order to feel it.
Good
You
point.
know, we don't push our hand down hard in order to feel something delicate. It's like we gently make contact with our hand in order
Mhm.
to sense the texture of something. And that's kind of how we feel horses. We can feel the texture of the muscles and sort of feel the movement of the bones just under the muscles. And when people say they can't feel that, there's two reasons. Either the rider is holding excess contraction in their
Mhm.
muscles, so they can't receive that texture, because it's more than our hand. Like our entire skin surface,
Oh,
every
yeah.
muscle
If
in
you
our
think
body can
exactly.
feel texture, right?
Right.
And the other reason is the horse's muscles are so tight, we really
Mhm.
can't feel much of anything
Right.
from about the horse or the skeletal coordination. So, like I gave her an example, I said, if you really relax your upper arm muscle, you can palpate it with your fingers and you can kind of feel where that humerus bone is,
Mhm.
right? You can kind of feel it. You could feel your scapula, you can feel the joint. But if you tighten your arm as hard as you can't feel the bone in there.
No,
And
because the sensation is shut down.
so a lot of times when people think a horse is lifting the back, this is something I see all the time. What they'll feel is uphill, which a lot of times
Interesting.
when people are seeking that uphill sensation in the
Mhm.
saddle to think their horse is lifting the back, it's not uncommon at all for the horse's shoulders and upper back and neck to be so tight that, and meanwhile, at the back end of the saddle, the back is downward,
Right.
right? So we go, oh, yeah, my horse is uphill. And I go, no, your horse is actually dropping his back, not lifting his
Right.
back. Or people can also think my horse is lifting the back when the horse is dropping the back. That is a surprisingly confusing issue to all riders. Just knowing what it feels like for their horse to lift the back. And
Hmm. Well, if
sometimes,
you're in a contractory state but trying to stay on, you can't hear,
no, but even if people aren't,
right?
one of the ways horses mask that makes it hard to feel if they're lifting their back is the excess muscle contraction, the contraction that they're using because the back is dropped.
Dropped. I see what you're
And
saying now. Okay.
right. And so it's like if the spine and the body weight is going downward, you're
Hmm.
going to get a boatload of contraction along the top of the back,
For support.
right?
And that goes to talk about how a muscle is being misused.
Right.
Because those muscles
Overused.
on the back are not meant to do that. Those erector spinae, even in humans, are not meant to stabilize the back. It's
Right.
deeper than that. And if
It,
they're engaged,
those outer muscles.
if the outer muscles are engaged for support, you're in trouble.
Yeah. So when a
Yeah.
horse drops the back, we could say outer or most upward muscles of the
Hmm.
horse's back are getting really contracted, usually in a shortening contraction. And that can create the sensation of upward force
It
to
could
the
probably
rider,
feel that way. Yeah.
right?
Right.
But there's a whole lot of instability going on if that's the case, because tight muscles in a horse are what unseat a rider. That's when we say the
Hmm.
horse is hard to ride or I can't sit that trot, that just like the joints being open and available, it's like the horse might be a really flashy, big mover.
Hmm.
But if those upper back muscles are tight, we can hardly sit the trot or the
Right.
canter.
It's like bouncing off a rubber band.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Or a buckboard. It's just like it's a
Right.
constantly tight muscle. because the horse's body weight is too far forward and down. So those back muscles have to contract excessively. And related to joints, the vertebral joints are no longer open and available for
No,
the horse because it's
right,
creating that same compression between the vertebra, and that is the source of kissing spine. So
right.
kissing spine is way more of a muscular
It's a
issue.
soft tissue use issue to me.
Yes, yes.
That's what it is. It's kind of the same thing. It has been proven, I don't know where the research study is, but going through 3 years of Alexander School, you usually gain 1 to 2 inches in height
Mm.
because you are practicing
You're just
daily,
creating more space in every
creating more
joint,
space in your joints,
right?
starting with the spine. So,
Right. And we talk about the spine a lot, but the spine
mhm,
is a whole bunch of joints that
yeah,
have to coordinate in unison in order to
mhm.
stabilize and move. That's a
Right.
it's a massive.
What muscles are for stability and what are for mobility? We've talked about that before. So for me, the muscles that are closest to the bone are the stabilizers.
Yeah,
The muscles we can see,
are
those are
the
the mobility muscles.
right.
That's the simplest way to look at it. I'm sure there's variance in between there, but that's the easiest way to think about it.
Yeah, and when the body's using the outer muscles for stability, the deeper core muscles start to atrophy. They're just not being
Right.
used for stability and they're not good at mobility. So
Right.
they just
And
kind of atrophy.
that's when the central nervous system kicks in. And I've seen it in horses too. You probably have fear response,
Oh yeah.
the
Yeah.
fear of falling for people.
Bodies hate being unstable
Yeah, and
and
it'll
struggling.
go it goes to the central nervous system because that's your warning sign, you
Hmm.
know. If I'm not stable, hey, hello, we've got to fix this. So hence the person with a walker. That person has lost all spinal integrity of balance
And I
and
would
is using
say,
arms and legs.
at least 80%, if not more, of horses with behavior problems,
Right.
they actually have physical balance issues.
It makes total sense because you
Yeah.
the body goes into survival mode.
Yeah. Yeah. They're just constantly trying to protect and defend.
Yeah.
And so that's where all the behavior we don't want lives. And you can't really access the behavior you do want because the whole body and system is now in protective mode.
Right. And it shuts down. So what happens is even in people is we get the contraction. The body
Hmm.
wants to go to fetal in the
Right.
human. I want safety. I want to protect my organs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to go into that type of shutdown mode
No, and
pretty
even
quick.
like the rider balance, people who drive with the seat, move with the horse, sit heavy in the seat, lean back, slump the shoulders,
Mhm,
anything that's putting a concentration of our body weight or movement of our torso right there in the saddle,
mhm.
that causes the horse to shorten and contract those
Oh,
outer back muscles
yeah.
protectively.
It's
So the
just pure
spine,
physics. They have to.
yeah. And so
It's
that's going to have the exact same effect we were talking about with the knee, is the horse is going to have that Golgi tendon reflex
response.
response, and the joints of the spine, the intervertebral joints, are now getting more and more and more compressed
Yes.
together. Yeah, and that just leads to a boatload of big health issues, not
Hmm.
little health issues. But before you get the big health issues, you'll usually get horses that are acting out with bad behavior,
Right.
or you'll start to have performance issues. Horse doesn't go left, can't pick up the right lead, has no steering, can't control speed, those kind of
Right.
performance issues, or lameness.
Or lameness.
I go, or lameness.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the effect of us not getting it right with horses.
Yeah,
And
because if your joints aren't open and available, you're contracting and you
right.
will
And if
not receive information about what's going on underneath you. You'll be strides behind.
yeah, and you're going to have a dynamic, laws of physics kind of dynamic
Mhm.
influence on the horse's muscle use.
Right.
Whether it's with your hands or your seat or your legs, you're influencing how the horse is coordinating and using their body by how you use yours.
And the horses can change so quickly. It's
Yeah, unbelievably.
thinking that if I stay here, if I hold this position,
Hmm.
you're missing the dynamics of
Yeah.
the relationship. So
Yeah, because
that's
I go,
why,
what it really comes down to is the mechanics take care of themselves. The physical
yeah.
coordination always works out most advantageously if we shift our focus to two simple laws of physics that are always influencing everything. And the first law of physics is basically, how do I say, the force of gravity. It's on
Mhm.
24/7, never stops. And
Always available.
it was like this gigantic epiphany moment for me to realize that weight, anything that has weight,
Hmm.
is the force of gravity acting on the mass of the body, right? So the body, like our body, doesn't have weight. That's why if we go into space, we float away.
Right,
We still have the same mass. We don't fall apart,
right.
but without gravity, there's no weight. So I go, that's a big part of it. And then when you put a rider on a horse, the rider's balance is relative to gravity because the second law that's
Mhm.
always active are the forces of motion, which we did several podcasts on. But I go, every time the horse blinks, it generates a force of motion that's
Exactly.
between us and gravity. So I go, you have forces of motion generated by the horse and gravity.
Right.
And if we don't understand it from that perspective, we're going to contract. We're going to compress our
Yes.
joints. We're going to grip. We're going to hang on, heels down, shoulders back, look where you're going, and just be stiff, so stiff, we can't feel what we're doing or what the horse is doing.
So I'll introduce another saying Deb always uses. I use it with kids more than anything. Instead of sitting up straight, can I sit up soft and tall?
Oh, good one.
Yeah, so that applies to are all my joints open and available? If I'm soft and tall, I'm available. I can use that saying on a horse. Am I soft and tall when I'm sitting on
Yeah.
my horse? Yeah.
And I kind of want to take a little well, not a sidetrack. I want to dig into that a little more because sometimes when soft and tall or open and available through the joints, I'll have students that get the mental image of loosey-goosey, noodly, wiggly, you
Yeah.
know, and I go, no, that's hypermobile. That actually will tighten
That's
your
no tone.
muscles. Yeah.
That's well,
Too
and
loose.
I've seen this. I'm sure you have too. It applies to people and horses. When we start working with people, or I start working with a person, they're usually using too much tension to maintain stability. They're using too much muscular efforting. That's the
Mm,
way of the land. Everything has to be an effort. And if we can change our thinking to, I've got this marvelous skeleton and I've got gravity. Why don't I just work with those two things?
yeah.
And then you become neutral and you only use the amount of tone you need
Yeah.
for the activity.
And that's what
Instead,
you mean by having your joints open and
hmm
available is a range
right.
of it's a it's a potential range of motion
It's
that's
availability, yeah.
that's dependent on not holding excessive muscle contraction.
Or the opposite, being
Too
a,
loose or not
a
enough muscle contraction.
right, but the availability has to be there. And what we see people and horses do is they go from too much tension to nothing,
To
kind of
not
falling
enough.
on their face because they don't know what they don't know yet.
Right?
And then with our guidance, they start to build on the availability of what tone I need to do the activity. So
And
you
that's
actually will have more energy to do your tasks if you're more available for the task.
yes.
Yeah,
It's conserving energy. You're not burning as
exactly.
much energy to do the same thing.
Exactly.
No, and that's so interesting because people who are really opposed to long and low, I'll get criticized, but I find if a horse has been going around with a short neck, whether it's over curled
Mhm.
forward or stuck straight up in the air like they're going to drown
Level
in
of
a
tension.
rainstorm,
Yep.
I go, that's way too much tension in the neck.
Hmm.
And I found it really valuable that as the spine, all the deeper core muscles start working again, the outer muscles spontaneously,
Hmm.
dynamically start to completely lose the tension. Because,
Right.
and it's almost like it has to go that way between
It does. I have
too
not
much
seen,
to too little
yeah,
before you find the
because
middle.
you don't know what your body does. You're kind of like rewiring the software, you know?
Yeah,
So, so, or it's like buying a house that was built in the 40s or 50s and changing all the wiring. It takes some time
yeah,
for all those connectors to connect and make sense.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't think we give ourselves permission. Sometimes as riders, we're
Mm.
so busy trying to look right or trying to give aids to the horse that we don't really even bring our attention to whether we're too tight or too loose.
Right. We get caught up in the doing of it all.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a big deal.
No, and one of my favorite images to play with riders is to sort of imagine the seat or the pelvis or the core full of liquid when you're riding.
That's a good one.
So it could be jello, it could be mud, it could be water, it could be soda pop, it doesn't matter. But it's like that, the way we've all learned how to carry water across the kitchen without spilling it, right? Because what do little kids have? Tippy cups because they dump their water all the time, right? So then we learn to hold a cup without spilling it and drink, right? Or we can drive and hold our cup of coffee. We can carry the
Silly
dog
us.
water bowl brimming full and carry it across the kitchen and set it down. And so we learn how to manage liquid,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And I love that image because when we learn to do that, that is the right amount of tone for the job. Because if you're too tight in your
Mhm.
muscles, the water goes sloshing out. And if you're too loose in your muscles, you just dump the water, right? So that's kind of on a moving force, on the moving forces of motion. It's a constant readjustment of
Yeah.
increasing and decreasing muscle use.
And if you've locked your hip or your knee, you can't make the changes fast enough. It's
Yeah, what I'll see a lot is people's heels jam down, their nips,
Mhm.
knees and hips are locked, and whether they have a tight rein or a loose rein doesn't seem to matter. But I look at the middle of the rider, and
Mhm.
if I see a lot of movement there, I know their balance is off, right?
Right. And
That they,
that's the disconnect because we talk about the seat as being the entire spine. And I'm
right,
seeing a ton of stuff on Facebook right now about the independent seat.
which to
So,
me means you can keep the water in the bowl no matter how your horse moves. Like
right.
that to me is an
You're
independency.
still
You don't spill,
right.
right? And I go, you can even think of it as jello, like to carry jello across the kitchen and not have it wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Like
Right.
that's the same
There's a
balance
level of
of tone.
stillness in your body to create that. And I,
Right.
I like to use the, I did this. think I went through McDonald's. This was years, 15 years ago or so, and I got an apple juice in
Mhm.
those little boxes. And it's a real eye-opening experience when you're trying to drive and put the straw in the box and you're squeezing the box too tight. What happens?
There goes your apple
Blah!
juice.
Apple juice all over me. And I went, oh, that's rain contact. I just blew rain contact right there in the McDonald's.
There you
I
go. That's
swear to
hilarious.
God. And that's when I started teaching it in workshops, was having people, what is the least, what it boils down to me is what is the least amount of muscular effort do I need for this activity?
Right,
Instead of thinking we have to do all of this muscling to get things done.
right. Or even like the jaw, like, just sort of
Hmm.
playing with the jaw joint
Hmm.
or the yes joint, right? Because
Hmm. The top
what
joints, the yes joint.
what balances our big old noggin is just this kind of flat surface,
Right.
right? That could go anywhere. And
It's a,
so
like it's like a rocking chair joint. It's like a swivel. That's what gives us the ability to quote unquote stick our necks out.
yeah, yeah, and if you do stick your neck out, you really feel the compression of the neck
Right.
vertebra and you feel the jaw tighten automatically.
Hmm.
And it's like, then if we go the other way and sort of suck it in like a turtle, you feel again. So there's just a
Yeah.
delicate place
Hmm.
where you feel like a bobblehead.
You just hang out.
Yeah. And I go, so it's not too loose or too tight, but people who are coming from chronically too loose,
Wow,
they
yeah, that's scary.
they
Yeah.
tend to always convey to me that this feels rigid and hard. And I go,
Hmm.
no, it's just toned. And people
Right.
who are coming from the camp of too tight
Hmm.
muscularly, they feel sloppy. Like
Yeah, I hear
they're
that.
like, this can't be right.
This
This
can't,
feels too sloppy.
yeah.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to stay on like this?
Yeah. So the brain is kind of
Yeah.
normalized either the
Yeah.
laxity of muscle use or the excessive muscle use.
Right.
And then when you actually sort of balance that bowl of water and find the right tone, the brain goes, ooh, I'm all sloppy and disorganized,
Hmm.
or I'm all rigid and like tight, right? And I go, no,
Right.
it's just where can you balance that bowl of water without spilling it or
Right.
letting the horse spill it? Because when the horse gets tight, it's going to slosh that water all over in the rider.
Right. And I
Yeah.
always go back to the jockey. I just watched the Preakness. Um, Talk about joints being openable
Oh, yeah.
because they would just boing right
Well, and
off
I
if they grip.
also, if we think of the skeleton has a relationship with gravity and is sort
Right.
of organized over gravity through the muscle, soft tissues, and joint use. So the open and available joints, they can only be sort of in an easy, full range of motion if the central skeleton is in a stable relationship with gravity.
Right.
Right. And so that in that case, what the joints do is actually it's kind of the intention of the design is it reduces the work of the muscles. It's a
Exactly.
much more efficient way
Exactly.
to either absorb the forces of motion, which is riding, or mobility, moving, right? So
Right. Availability. Yeah.
if you look at a really good athlete, that ease of motion that you see in a really good athlete is somebody who's using minimum muscle
Hmm.
for mobility and maximum joint range of motion.
Yeah. If we start riding more with our bones, if we can
Hmm.
just think of ride with my skeleton and only use the amount of muscular effort I need,
Right.
it might be helpful.
And that's why we have joints everywhere.
Right.
there's all these connecting points between the bones. We're not just a rigid skeleton.
Not one pole.
Right, right. But we can, like, in order to have joints open and available, the stability's got to go somewhere. So if it goes inward to the core muscles and inward in the skeleton to the central line of the skull, spine, and pelvis, then all of those mobile, huge joints in the limbs are open and available
Right.
to,
If you do not have the stability in your head, neck, back, and pelvis, so your spine, your arms and legs cannot go to full capacity. It's impossible.
yeah, the body won't have it.
Yeah, it's
It's
the law
like,
of biomechanics. It's
yeah,
just not going to work.
yeah, because the body's like, okay, you dumb brain, you're gonna fall over if we don't do
Yeah,
this.
well, that's kind of, I think it was Mary Todd, which she's was a physician back in the 40s, wrote a book and an anatomy book, and she says that exact thing. The brain's first priority is to maintain uprightness.
Right,
Everything else comes second. So if your uprightness is not close to maximum, then your limbs are going to be the ones that are going to be paying the price for that with lack of range of motion.
right. And it's so automatic
It
that
is.
a lot of times I'll have people just become aware of it.
Mhm.
So even you guys sitting and listening, if you're in a chair or standing, if you sort of shift your skeleton and all your weight to the left, all your joints tighten on the right. All your
All the
muscles
muscles are
tighten
going to
on the
have,
right.
that's just the law of physics right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we're three-dimensional.
Very,
So
we're very tubular.
we can have our weight too high or too low, too
Hmm.
forward or too backwards, too far left or too right. But
Hmm.
it's so interesting because it's like just leaning around in different
Hmm.
directions. If you lean really far forward, you feel the muscles in the back half tighten.
Right.
Automatically, you feel the restriction of the joints. So if I reach really, really, really far with my left arm, my right shoulder joint is going to start compressing and the muscles around it
Move.
automatically tighten.
Yeah.
I go, that's just how it works. I'm like, I
Yeah.
didn't invent it. It's just how it works. I didn't make it up.
Nope. It's just that. It would be like if you're in the barn, you would not try to pick up a 5-gallon bucket of water, sticking your arm out all the way and try to pick it up. Your
Right.
body knows, get your center of mass as close to
Closer.
over the top of that thing. The body knows that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't like stretch forward with your body, weight on the toes, long arm, and then try to pick up the bucket. Like,
I
no,
see, yeah, I
who
see.
does that, right?
Well, I see gardeners get hurt, if you can believe it, because they do that. They won't get their center of mass closer to the activity. They're going to reach and then they pull something. It's amazing. You think gardening is not a sport
Oh,
that you get hurt, or pickleball. I see so many pickleball injuries. It's incredible.
from like overextending, yeah,
Overextension. Like, I
yeah,
gotta get that ball.
yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
Right.
No, and I go, it's actually just having a farm and taking care of horses. I go, it
Hmm.
is the gym workout. It is farm fitness.
Hmm.
But I go, when I have to pick up 50-pound feed bags or I'm carrying 5-gallon buckets of water, it's like that's a heavy weight. And
Right.
you can really do yourself in and have an injury if you're not conscious.
Or
I,
even fatigue, more fatigue, and not be able to accomplish as much.
oh yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, more fatigue. I can find I can do much more if the body just loves having the center of mass over the feet. That's like right below your belly button, over the top of your feet.
Hmm.
And if I just keep thinking that throughout my day, I can usually accomplish more because
And
I'm
you
not
and you feel
overusing.
the joints helping you rather
Right.
than the effort of using that much muscle
Right.
energy. Yeah, I loved that you took in like a muck fork and 5-gallon water buckets to your
To
Alexander
school.
school because I'm like, I'll tell you what, I go
Deal with that.
over 50, I can out shovel most 21-year-olds. I
Yeah.
go, I can outwork a lot of younger people because of just being super conscious that when I'm lifting heavy things, when I'm doing manual labor,
Right.
that I just need to pay attention.
And take it to doing your simple tasks like driving a car, putting your saddle on, putting your bridle on. You don't realize those repetitive things done poorly
Right.
are
And
going to,
it's just like a horse. If we are doing
Mhm,
something athletic that either requires fast speeds, heavy weights, or repetitive motion, like a lot of sports,
mhm.
and we're not paying attention to it, we can get a sports injury,
Exactly.
just
Or
the
that
very
crick
same
in your
way.
neck that just won't go away.
Yeah. And people go, oh, I'm getting old. I'm getting old.
Don't talk to me. I'm 10 years older than
Eh,
you.
eh,
Come on.
Yeah. And I go, I think hitting 50, it was like, wow, I need to pay attention not only to
Mm,
stay healthy so I can keep doing what I love doing, which is gardening and horses, but I go, just so I have the frickin' energy to get through the day sometimes. I go,
right.
that energy conservation becomes more
Yeah.
important as we age, and I get more energy if I'm just paying
Hmm.
attention. Are my
Yeah.
joints open and available before I lift
Hmm.
something? Am I
Yep.
using my joints or am I using my muscle? Am I organizing my center or am I relying on my limbs?
Right.
And those are just thoughts,
It
thoughts
comes
that,
it and we always ask this question in workshops, what comes first, the thought or the action? And it's actually the thought. Most of our stuff is pre-programmed in our head
hmm
because that's just makes our lives easier. But when you go into doing Alexander work, you're examining all those programs and questioning, could I do better?
ooh, and rewriting the code.
Rewriting the
Yeah.
codes. A lot of people don't, well, there aren't that many Alexander teachers, and that's probably why, because who wants to go rewire their subconscious thinking?
It's not for everybody.
It's not for
It is not for everybody. Like, I go,
everyone.
the benefits of it are phenomenal,
Yeah,
but it takes us slowing down in order to rewrite the code. It's not a super
good point.
fast process.
But isn't that what we're doing with the horses?
It's exactly what I'm doing with the
Yeah, that
horses.
are we're having to rehab those that tried to speed everything up.
Well, or that's why I sort of gravitated to that term, horse educator instead of horse trainer,
I like that.
because I'm going back and filling in the education of what I consider
Hmm.
a solid education.
Baseline. Hmm.
And I go, it's also a no-fail system. Like a lot of these horses, probably like kids in school, they get shoved through the stages of learning in a specific time frame, but maybe they learned, maybe they didn't. Maybe
Exactly.
maybe they
It,
passed the test, but they couldn't retain anything.
I was good at, I was great at taking tests, but that didn't mean I understood what I was doing. I just was great at memorizing things.
Yeah. Yeah, and exactly it. So you hit a certain plateau when the education is reliant on memory. And that's
Mhm.
why a lot of times people they go, "Oh, my horse has had a month off. This is going to be chaos when I start up again. We're going to be starting all over because of the time off." And I go, "My horses have time off, but they don't forget
Mine don't forget either.
because they're educated."
They're educated into better use
Yes.
instead of just doing the thing.
And not only better use, but it's like working around a problem, like my horse tries to bite me when I girth. My horse pins
Mhm.
his ears when I put the saddle on. Those are just outward indicators of deeper issues.
Exactly.
And if we don't take the time to educate the horse that the saddle placement or tightening the girth shouldn't be, really should not be painful. So what's the issue,
Right.
right? What is the issue and how do we re-educate the nervous system that those two things are not painful? They're not uncomfortable. They don't have to be sort of like, you don't have to be so protective about that. We don't go out and find a saddle that's going to hurt our horse's back. And we don't, you know, try to create pain with the cinch. And maybe that happens inadvertently. And we go, oh, that's just a snarky horse. But it's usually a sign that there's a little bit of an issue under the surface.
I think so too. It's kind of like I got an email this morning from a client that was a client for quite a few years, and he said that he was fixed, whatever that means.
How's that working for you?
How's that working for you? About asking about my wrist pain.
I'm
And
fixed, but my wrists hurt.
yeah,
Oh, if you were fixed, your wrist wouldn't hurt.
he's a writer, so he's at the keyboard a lot.
hmm
And then, asking for a referral to a surgeon. And I thought, wow, that's interesting.
Somebody's calling you for a referral to a surgeon.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Isn't it the other way around? It usually works.
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
think it's Jack Stern, who is a spinal surgeon in New York, actually wrote a book about how his wife is an Alexander teacher and a physical therapist, and how he said 90 some percent of back surgeries can be prevented by using the Alexander technique.
absolutely.
Yeah, he refers people to the Alexander technique before he ever.
Or a really good physical therapist, it's
Yeah.
like if they really understand, like an Alexander technique instructor, some, not all physical therapists will work with the body in a similar way.
Mhm.
And that pain in skeletal pain, whether it's the hip joint, the knee joint, back joints, bulging disc, all of that kind of stuff, even pinched nerves, usually have more to do with the muscles being chronically misused that has been
Exactly.
compressing on that joint for so long, right?
Exactly. And
Like,
it's another podcast about our whole referral system of my knee hurts. Well, is that true? Is
you were not that polite with me. You just
No,
looked at me and
that
go, it's not your knee. Take the brace off. Never use that. It's not your knee.
was it's just a signal. It's just like the body picked a place that you're probably going to pay attention to. And we have to learn at looking at the entire organism of how it's being used and why that one place is screaming at you.
And so that's kind of why you say, are my joints open and available all the
Mhm.
time? Because it's a constant check-in. Am
Constant
I,
check-in with me when I'm everywhere, mainly when I'm riding,
so
because I don't
am
want,
I too tight?
yeah,
Am I overusing my muscles? Am I underusing my muscles?
right.
Yeah.
And you might not know the answer, but just questioning it is a great start.
But you know what I find too is like we were talking about earlier, we don't know what the middle feels like until we
Mm-mm.
visit either extreme.
You have to go to the extremes.
But I go, guess
Mhm.
what? We can do that on purpose.
We
It's just
can.
people feel a bit stupid or silly when they're doing it. But I go, in the privacy of your own home,
Hmm.
right? With nobody watching, you could practice or play with being really as loose as possible, loosey-goosey, and gather some information about that use of your body. Or you could walk around for 5 minutes with every muscle in your body as tight as possible
Right,
and feel the effect of that. And I
right.
think because the brain normalizes anything, if we don't play
Exactly.
with those extremes, then we go, yeah, we're fixed until we have
Mhm.
wrist pain.
Or
Right?
we've said this before, take pictures of yourself, use a mirror.
Yeah.
It's not going to lie.
Yes.
You might feel like you're perfectly upright and balanced, but in your mirror, you're sitting on your pockets. You've just
Yeah.
programmed that
It's
as
just
being
normal.
okay.
Yeah. And I tell people all the time, I go, it is humbling the power of the brain and the nervous system
Mhm.
because I go, even after 25 years of doing this, I go, sometimes as I've learned other ways to find my balance than relying on what my brain has to say
Tells you
about
to
it.
do.
And it still happens
Oh, yeah.
where I'm using my other sort of keying into different, uh, sort of less subjective parts of my body or less subjective ways of feeling my balance. And my brain will go, oh no, you're too far forward. You're
Yeah.
too far back. You're too far to the right. You're too
Mr.
far to the
Manager
left.
in there.
Right. And I'm like, shut it.
Shut up.
Shut it. You're
Shut
usually
up.
wrong, brain. So just take a break, think about something else.
Yeah.
And that's why sort of feeling our weight distribution, looking at ourselves, whether it's pictures or video, or even when I ride, looking down and go, are my thigh bones symmetrical to each other?
Mhm.
And it's like when I first did that, my brain is like, that can't be right. That just can't be right.
I am not seeing that.
Yeah. And my thigh bones are like, nope, we're symmetrical. That's where we're supposed to be.
Right.
So, anyways, we I don't think we digressed too
We
much
did pretty
this. We
good.
did pretty good. Yeah. So if you guys still have questions
Yeah, we love them.
on what open and available, what Deb means by that is not too loose, not too tight,
It's availability.
but it is sort of an ease of range of motion through whatever joint you pick on at any time.
Yep.
Vertebral joints, knee joints, jaw joints, skull joint. There's a lot of them to choose from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just play.
Yeah.
Go play.
Yeah. And if I think if you do play with extreme tightness, extreme looseness,
Mhm.
all of a sudden you start to recognize habits that we've normalized and go,
Right.
wow, I am tight there all the time.
Yep.
It actually happened to me. I was riding without stirrups. I was just letting my legs dangle because one of my personal horses is at a tricky point, and it really helps me feel because as a jump
Yes.
rider, my legs were just nothing but tight all the time.
Jacked up.
So I like to take my legs out of the stirrups and let them dangle when I need to get into the detail with the horse under saddle. And so I picked up my stirrups on the way back to the barn as I'm riding him back. And I was like, when did those get so short? Like my legs I had to go down 2 holes on my stirrup length
Yep.
again and went, oh, yeah, I was really
There's an
still,
unwinding that needs to take place
yeah, I was
of the
still
legs. It's
tighter
an
in my
unwinding.
legs than I thought I was.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, you guys, it's very human of us. We're all in the same boat. And it's a learning process for your whole life to get good at movement and
It's
good
just
at
a process to
coordination.
just constantly be in the question.
Yeah,
Just be in the question.
yeah. But I think the older we get, the more important it becomes to
Mhm.
start asking that question,
Yes.
especially if you want to keep riding and you want to keep running your farm. It gets really
Yep.
important. Yeah. All right, you guys. Thank you for joining us for another episode. We hope you found a lot of value in this. We love the question being posted for
Yes.
this
Yes. Love
podcast.
that.
Yep. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.